The Force had always spoken to Anakin Skywalker in whispers and nudges, gentle currents guiding his instincts in battle, warming his soul in meditation. But on Mortis, it screamed. The crystalline chamber pulsed with ancient power as the vision consumed him. A towering figure in black armor, mechanical breathing echoing through a corridor of corpses. Jedi corpses, younglings, the temple burning, Padmé's face twisted in horror and heartbreak, her hand reaching for him even as life fled her eyes. And that voice, distorted by machinery yet unmistakably his own, "I hate you." Anakin had experienced visions before, brief flashes of possible futures, warnings wrapped in metaphor. This was different. This was vivid, absolute, inevitable. He felt the hate coursing through that armored monster's veins, tasted the ash of the Jedi Temple. He heard Obi-Wan's anguished cry as he struck down his former master. "No!" Anakin's scream tore from his throat as he tried to pull away from the nightmare, to wake up, to reject this impossible future. This isn't real. This can't be. The sun's laughter cut through his denial, cold and mocking. "Oh, but it is, Skywalker. This is what you become. This is your destiny." But the sun's voice suddenly faltered, confusion flickering across his ancient features. The chamber's crystalline walls began to crack, not with darkness or light, but with something else entirely, raw, unfiltered Force energy in its purest form. The vision didn't fade. Instead, it intensified, becoming more solid, more real, until Anakin couldn't tell where the nightmare ended and reality began. The Father's voice boomed through the shattering space, urgent and alarmed. "No, the Force itself is..." Reality fractured. Anakin felt himself being pulled not backward into wakefulness, not deeper into vision, but sideways through existence itself. The Mortis chamber exploded into fragments of light and shadow, each piece containing a moment from his future. Vader kneeling before Palpatine, Vader marching on the Jedi Temple, Vader standing over Obi-Wan's empty robes, Vader reaching toward a young man with his own eyes. The Force wasn't showing him anymore, it was taking him. Through the kaleidoscope of possible and actual timelines, Anakin tumbled without direction or control. He saw the Clone Wars end in fire and betrayal, saw the Republic transform into an empire, saw Padmé's funeral, saw twin suns setting over a desert world where a baby cried in an old woman's arms, saw his own body, scarred and broken, sealed inside black armor that kept him alive and imprisoned him simultaneously. And then he saw something else, a future beyond Vader, a masked figure, younger, conflicted, reaching toward a lightsaber with a trembling hand. The Force whispered a name, Kylo Ren, his grandson, corrupted by the shadow of a monster who, in Anakin's present, had not yet been born. "Stop!" Anakin screamed into the temporal maelstrom. "Send me back! I'll change it! The Force answered not with words, but with a final, violent pull that felt like being torn apart and reassembled simultaneously. Anakin slammed into solid ground, gasping, his entire body screaming in protest. Sand. He was face down in sand, the taste of it gritty in his mouth. For one desperate moment, he thought he was back on Tatooine, that everything had been just a nightmare, that he could warn the Council, save Padmé, prevent. But when he pushed himself up and opened his eyes, he knew immediately this wasn't Tatooine. The sky was wrong, a sickly purple-gray that spoke of atmospheric corruption or stellar anomalies. The sand beneath him was too dark, almost black, and it crunched like glass when he moved. In the distance, twisted metal structures jutted from the ground, like the bones of some massive mechanical beast, their surfaces scorched and melted in patterns that suggested unimaginable heat. Anakin staggered to his feet, his hand instinctively reaching for his lightsaber. The familiar weight at his hip grounded him, proved this was real and not another vision. He was still in his Jedi robes from the Mortis mission, still wore his armored glove, still felt the Force flowing through him, strong and clear, but the Force felt different, older, tired, like it carried the weight of decades he hadn't lived. "Obi-Wan," he called out, his voice cracking. "Ahsoka? Anyone?" Silence answered him, broken only by the distant groan of metal settling and a wind that carried the scent of old burning. Anakin expanded his awareness, reaching out through the Force to sense any life nearby. What he found made his blood run cold. The planet was nearly dead. A handful of small creatures, hardy scavengers adapted to harsh environments. No sentient life for kilometers. But there was something else. A presence in the Force, distant but powerful, dark but not purely malicious, conflicted, raging like a star burning itself out. And beneath his feet, buried in the dark sand, he sensed metal. Lots of it. Yet technology, wreckage. Anakin dropped to his knees and began digging with his hands, then stopped, closed his eyes and used the Force instead. The sand swirled away, revealing what lay beneath. A piece of armor, white, angular, scored with blaster marks, but not clone trooper armor. The design was similar but wrong, streamlined in ways that suggested decades of evolution. He pulled more pieces from the sand. A shattered helmet with a distinctive black visor slit. Remnants of a weapon he didn't recognize, its power cell long dead. Stormtrooper armor. He knew the name somehow, felt it whispered by the Force itself. This was Empire technology, but newer, different. First Order, another whisper suggested, and with it came a flash of knowledge. Fragments of history he shouldn't possess but did, bleeding through from the vision or the Force or whatever had brought him here. The Empire had fallen, had risen again, had been challenged by a resistance so desperate they made the rebellion of Vader's era, look well-equipped. "Where am I?" Anakin whispered, standing amid the wreckage. "When am I?" A sound behind him spun him around, lightsaber igniting in a snap hiss of blue plasma. But it was just a piece of debris falling from one of the twisted structures. Anakin kept his blade active as he approached the nearest ruin, his mechno arm whirring softly as he climbed over rubble. The structure had been a facility of some kind, military, based on the reinforced walls and blast doors hanging from broken hinges. Anakin squeezed through an opening and found himself in what had once been a command center. Consoles lined the walls, most of them shattered beyond recognition, but one, protected by a fallen ceiling panel, still had a faint power signature. Anakin placed his hand on the console. With the Force, he could sense the residual data, the echo of information stored in its dying circuits. He closed his eyes and let the Force guide him, pulling fragments of stored records into coherent images. A battle. Massive capital ships exchanging fire, star destroyers painted red with a symbol he'd never seen. Smaller ships with X-wing silhouettes but wrong configurations fighting desperately. A transmission, partial and corrupted. All remaining forces to evacuate. Crate is lost. General Organa orders. General Organa. The name hit him like a physical blow. Leia, his daughter. The Force had shown him twins in the vision, Luke and Leia. She was alive in this timeline. He old enough to be a general, fighting another war, but the timestamp on the transmission made his head spin. 34 ABY, after the Battle of Yavin. A battle he'd never heard of but somehow knew was pivotal. The moment the rebellion struck its first major blow against the Empire, against Vader. 34 years after a battle that hadn't happened yet in his timeline. "No," Anakin breathed, releasing the console and stumbling backward. "No, no, no, this is still the vision. This has to be..." But he knew it wasn't. The Force pulsed around him, real and present and undeniable. The sand beneath his boots was real. The dead planet was real. The armor of fallen soldiers was real. The Force had taken the nightmare and made it real. It had pulled him from Mortis, from his own time, and hurled him decades into a future where everything he'd seen in that terrible vision had already come to pass. Anakin collapsed against the broken console, his lightsaber deactivating as he gripped his head with both hands. Padme was dead, had been dead for decades. Obi-Wan, Force, had he really tried to kill Obi-Wan? The younglings, had he really? Focus, he growled to himself, forcing the panic down through Jedi breathing techniques. You're alive, you're here, there's a reason. The Force doesn't do anything without purpose. He stood, straightening his spine, and looked around the ruined command center with new eyes. Not a victim's eyes, a Jedi's eyes. If he was here in this future, then perhaps it wasn't too late. The Force had shown him the nightmare, then brought him to its aftermath. Why? To punish him? To warn him? Or to give him a chance to fix what Vader had broken? That presence in the Force called to him again, stronger now. Dark, conflicted, powerful. Anakin closed his eyes and focused on it, reaching through the Force to understand what he was sensing. Young, male, trained in the Force but corrupted, twisted by pain and rage and legacy. Kylo Ren, the Force whispered again. Ben Solo, your grandson. Anakin's eyes snapped open. His grandson, the son of Leia, and the Force provided the name, Han Solo. Corrupted by the dark side, following in Vader's footsteps because he believed that was his destiny, his heritage, his grandfather's legacy. The pieces clicked into place. The Force hadn't brought him here to witness the aftermath of his failure. It had brought him here to prevent the cycle from continuing, to face his grandson before that twisted legacy could consume him completely. Anakin Skywalker, the Chosen One, stepped out of the ruined command center and into the dying light of the alien world. Somewhere out there, beyond this dead planet, the galaxy still turned. The Force still flowed. And somewhere, a young man who shared his blood was making the same mistakes Anakin had once made. But this time, Anakin knew what came next, knew the cost, knew the price of falling to the dark side. This time, he could stop it before it began. If you want to see more characters enter the Star Wars galaxy or witness more temporal Force interventions, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character or timeline you'd want to see in the comments below. May the Force be with you. Anakin reached out through the Force, finding the direction of that dark presence. It was distant, likely off-world, but he could feel it like a beacon. He just needed a ship, needed to leave this graveyard and enter the living galaxy. He began walking through the wreckage, searching for anything salvageable, a shuttle, a transport, any vessel that might still have power. The Force guided his steps, and after an hour of searching through the ruins, he found it. A partially buried TIE fighter, its solar panels cracked but its core surprisingly intact. As Anakin worked to free the ship, using the Force to lift debris and his mechanical skills to assess the damage, one thought burned through his mind with crystalline clarity. The nightmare was real. The future had already happened, but he was the Chosen One, and the Force itself had given him this impossible second chance. He would not waste it. The TIE fighter's systems hummed to life, with a sound that was both familiar and alien to Anakin's ears. Imperial engineering, he understood the principles even if the specific configurations were decades beyond anything he'd worked with. The Empire had built on Republic designs, twisted them, perfected them for intimidation and efficiency over elegance. Vader's Empire. Anakin shoved the thought aside as he completed his repairs, his mechanical hand moving with practiced precision through the fighter's guts. 3 hours of work using salvaged parts from 2 other crashed TIEs and the Force to compensate where components were missing entirely. The hyperdrive was shot, but the sublight engines would function. The Navy computer was fragmented, but it had retained enough stellar cartography data for him to orient himself. He was in the Outer Rim, a system called Crate, according to the corrupted records, a mining world abandoned decades ago, then briefly reoccupied during his breath-caught the Battle of Crate. A last stand by the resistance against the First Order. Leia had been here. His daughter had fought here, fled from here. The realization made his hands still on the control panel. Somewhere in this galaxy, if she was still alive, Leia Organa was leading a desperate resistance against tyranny, just as she'd done before against the Empire, against Vader, against her own father, not knowing. No, that wasn't quite right. The Force provided another fragment of knowledge, bleeding through from whatever temporal bridge had brought him here. Luke had told her the truth. She knew that Darth Vader was Anakin Skywalker, that the monster who had hunted the rebellion was her father. Anakin climbed into the TIE fighter's cockpit, his larger frame barely fitting in the cramped space designed for smaller pilots. The controls felt wrong in his hands, too simple, too brutal, designed for overwhelming numbers rather than pilot skill. He missed his Jedi starfighter with a sudden, fierce ache. The engines roared to life, kicking up clouds of black sand as the fighter lifted unsteadily from the wreckage. Anakin guided it up through Crate's thin atmosphere, fighting the damaged stabilizers until he broke free into open space. Stars greeted him, familiar constellations made unfamiliar by 3 decades of stellar drift and his own temporal displacement. The Navy computer identified the nearest inhabited system, a small outpost world 3 systems over, reachable with his limited fuel reserves. But before he set course, Anakin paused, his hand hovering over the controls. In the distance, he could see them, massive chunks of metal debris, dead capital ships frozen in their death throes. The remains of the Battle of Crate, scattered across the void like monuments to futility. He recognized the ship designs from the fragmented records. First Order Star Destroyers, their hulls split open by sustained fire. Smaller resistance vessels, punching far above their weight class. And there, drifting in the center of the debris field like a broken titan, the unmistakable silhouette of an MC-85 Star Cruiser, its engines cold, its hull breached in a dozen places. Something drew Anakin toward it, not just curiosity, but a pull in the Force, faint but insistent. Someone had died there, multiple someones. But their echoes still lingered in the wreckage, memories burned into the metal by the intensity of their final moments. He guided the TIE fighter through the debris field, dodging chunks of hull plating and frozen bodies still trapped in their final positions. The cruiser's main hangar was accessible, its atmospheric shields long failed. Anakin slipped the fighter inside and set down on the deck, the magnetic clamps barely catching on the degraded surface. The hangar was a tomb. Resistance fighters lay where they'd fallen, their bodies preserved by the vacuum, their faces frozen in expressions of determination and desperation. Anakin whispered a Jedi prayer for the dead as he moved through them, his boots mag-locked to the deck in the zero gravity. He found what the Force had drawn him to in the ship's command center, a partially functional terminal still receiving power from an emergency battery that should have died years ago. The Force had kept it alive, Anakin realized, kept it waiting for him. His fingers danced over the controls, his natural affinity for technology allowing him to navigate the unfamiliar interface. The ship's logs were extensive, dating back months before the final battle. He started pulling files at random, piecing together a picture of this future he'd been thrust into. Vice Admiral Holdo, Poe Dameron, Finn, Rose Tico, names that meant nothing to him, but clearly meant everything to the people who'd fought here. The log spoke of the First Order's relentless pursuit, of a fleet running on fumes and hope, of impossible odds and the kind of desperate courage that Anakin recognized from 1,000 Clone Wars battles. But it was another name that made him stop, his breath catching in his throat. Luke Skywalker, his son. The logs referenced him with reverence, with hope, with the kind of faith usually reserved for legends. Master Skywalker will come. One log entry read, "He has to. We just need to hold out until..." Anakin's hands trembled as he pulled up every file mentioning Luke. The picture that emerged was fragmentary but devastating. Luke had become a Jedi Master, had attempted to rebuild the Jedi Order, had taken on students including Ben Solo, Leia's son, Anakin's grandson. The file showed an image, a younger face that Anakin had never seen but somehow recognized in the bone structure, in the intensity of the eyes. A boy, the maybe 16, lightsaber in hand, standing among other students, Luke's arm around his shoulders, hope and potential radiating from every pixel. And then another file, older, the tragedy of Luke Skywalker's failed order. Anakin forced himself to read it, each word a knife in his chest. Luke had sensed darkness growing in Ben, had confronted him, had made a choice, a terrible split-second choice born of fear and the weight of knowing what darkness unchecked could become. Had ignited his lightsaber over his sleeping nephew's bed. Ben had awakened, had seen his master, his uncle, standing over him with a weapon ignited, had felt betrayed, abandoned, terrified, had chosen darkness. "No," Anakin whispered, the word echoing in the dead command center. "Luke, no, what did you do?" But he understood. Force help him, he understood. Luke had seen the vision of what Ben could become, had seen perhaps echoes of Vader in his nephew's future, had tried to prevent it, to cut out the cancer before it could spread, and in doing so had created the very monster he feared, Kylo Ren. The logs were filled with references to him, supreme leader of the First Order, Vader's heir, a dark side warrior who wore a mask in imitation of his grandfather, who worshipped at the altar of Vader's memory, who believed that embracing the darkness was his birthright. Anakin's grandson thought being like Vader was his destiny. The irony was suffocating. Anakin had been pulled forward through time to escape becoming Vader, only to discover that Vader's shadow was so long, so dark, that it had corrupted his own bloodline 3 decades later. He pulled up more files, desperate for understanding. The First Order's propaganda was everywhere. Holovids showing Kylo Ren's power, his ruthlessness, his dedication to finishing what Darth Vader had started. And in every image, every recording, Anakin saw the same thing, a young man drowning in anger and pain, clinging to darkness because it was the only inheritance he believed he had. One file in particular made Anakin's blood run cold. A recovered recording from the Hosnian system, dated just a few years ago. Kylo Ren standing on the bridge of a massive vessel, a dreadnought that dwarfed even the Venator-class ships. Anakin knew from the Clone Wars, and in the viewport behind him, visible for just a moment before the feed cut out, a weapon firing, not a turbo laser, not even a super laser like the Death Star his fragmented knowledge whispered had existed, a star killer. A weapon that consumed an entire star and used its energy to destroy multiple planets simultaneously. The Hosnian system, 5 planets, billions of lives gone in an instant, and Kylo Ren had been there, had watched it happen, had perhaps even given the order. Anakin's stomach heaved. He barely made it to the corner before he vomited, his body rebelling against the horror of what his legacy had wrought. The younglings in the temple had been terrible enough in the vision, but this was genocide on a scale that made even that atrocity pale in comparison. "What have I done?" he gasped, wiping his mouth with a shaking hand. "What did I become?" The Force pulsed around him, not with judgment but with something else. Purpose, intent. A message he struggled to understand through his horror and grief. He forced himself back to the terminal, and forced himself to keep reading. There had to be more. Had to be something that explained how this had happened, how the Chosen One's destiny had led to this cascade of darkness across generations. He found files on the Empire's rise, watched in growing horror as records detailed the transformation of the Republic into a totalitarian regime, saw images of star destroyers blockading planets, of stormtroopers enforcing order through fear, of worlds glassed for rebellion, and at the center of it all, Darth Vader, the Emperor's enforcer, the Jedi hunter, the symbol of imperial might that even children feared. Anakin watched recovered holovid footage of Vader striding through a rebel base, lightsaber cutting through soldiers like they were nothing. Watched him force choke officers for failure. Now watched him stand silent and imposing at the Emperor's side while worlds burned. The breathing, that mechanical, rhythmic breathing that had haunted his nightmare. It was in every recording a constant reminder that the man in the armor was more machine than human, more monster than man. One file contained a partial record from something called the Death Star, a space station the size of a small moon, designed to destroy entire planets. Anakin's hands froze on the controls as he read the technical specifications. This wasn't a weapon. This was an abomination, a perversion of everything the Republic had stood for, and Vader had overseen its construction. The file continued. The Death Star had been destroyed by the rebellion, by Luke. His son had struck the blow that brought down the Empire's ultimate weapon, and Vader had been there, who had tried to stop him, had hunted him. Father hunting son through the corridors of a battle station designed to annihilate worlds. Anakin closed his eyes, fighting against the tide of despair threatening to overwhelm him. This was his future. This was what he became. Every choice, every moment of anger, every compromise with darkness, they all led here to this terrible legacy that poisoned his children and grandchildren. But there was more. Another file, heavily encrypted, but yielding to his force-enhanced slicing techniques. A record from the second Death Star. Vader had redeemed himself. The words on the screen blurred as tears filled Anakin's eyes. At the end, in the final moments, Vader had turned back to the light, had saved Luke from the Emperor, had died not as a monster, but as Anakin Skywalker, redeemed through love for his son. It wasn't enough, could never be enough to balance the scales of what he'd done, but it was something, a crack in the darkness, proof that even after decades of evil, the light could still break through. Anakin slumped in the command chair, the weight of his future pressing down on him like a physical force. The Jedi were gone. The Republic was gone. The Empire had risen and fallen, only to be replaced by the First Order. And his grandson, his own blood, thought the answer was to embrace the darkness that had destroyed everything. The terminal beeped, pulling his attention back. One final file accessed automatically by some subroutine in the ship's dying systems. A message recorded shortly before the Battle of Crate. Leia Organa's face filled the screen. Older, lined with care and grief, but her eyes still sharp, but still full of the same determination that Anakin recognized from his own reflection. "If anyone finds this," she said, her voice steady despite the exhaustion visible in every line of her face, "know that we fought. Know that we resisted. The First Order may have the ships, the weapons, the power, but they don't have hope. They don't have the Force on their side. Not really. Darkness may be loud, may be terrifying, but it always consumes itself in the end." She paused, looking off screen for a moment before continuing. "My brother tried to tell me once that our father saved him, that Darth Vader in his final moments chose love over hate. I want to believe that. I need to believe that. Because if he could come back from that darkness, then maybe Ben can too." Her voice cracked on her son's name. And Anakin's heart broke all over again. "Ben," Leia whispered, staring directly into the recorder, "if you ever see this, if you ever wake up from this nightmare you've trapped yourself in, know that I never stopped believing you could come home. Your grandfather fell, but he rose again. You can too. Please, Ben, come home." The message ended. Anakin sat in the darkness of the dead ship, surrounded by the ghosts of a future he'd never lived but had caused nonetheless, and wept. For Padme, dead by his hand or his choices. For Obi-Wan, betrayed by the brother he'd loved. For the younglings, for the Jedi, for the billions who died under Vader's watch or Kylo Ren's command. But as his tears fell, something else began to burn in his chest. Not despair, not grief, determination. The Force had brought him here for a reason. It had pulled him from Mortis, from his own time, and thrown him into this future. Not to punish him, not to show him the futility of fighting fate, to give him a chance to break the cycle. Vader had been redeemed, but only after causing unspeakable suffering. Luke had tried to prevent the darkness and had created it instead. The pattern was clear. Darkness begetting darkness, each generation making the same mistakes in different ways. But Anakin was here now. Not Vader, not the broken monster in black armor. Anakin Skywalker, still whole, still uncorrupted, still the chosen one who could bring balance to the Force. And his grandson was still alive, still reachable, still capable of redemption before the fall became irreversible. Anakin stood, wiping his eyes, and downloaded every file he could from the terminal into the TIE Fighter's limited storage. He needed to understand this future, needed to know what he was walking into. Then he returned to his ship and set course for the nearest inhabited system. He needed information, needed resources, needed to find the Resistance and his daughter, needed to find Kylo Ren and save him from becoming what Anakin had been shown he himself would become. The TIE Fighter's engines fired, pulling away from the dead cruiser and the graveyard of Crate. As the stars streaked past, Anakin made himself a promise. This timeline, this future, it had already happened. He couldn't change his own past, couldn't prevent Vader from rising, but he could prevent Vader's legacy from consuming another generation. He would save his grandson, or die trying. The outpost world was called Nar Shaddaa, a name that sparked recognition in Anakin's memories of the Clone Wars, the Smuggler's Moon. A vertical city wrapped around a moon that orbited Nal Hutta, controlled by criminal syndicates and serving as a haven for anyone trying to stay off official records. It had been lawless in his time. 3 decades later, it was even worse. Anakin brought the damaged TIE Fighter down in a decrepit landing bay in the mid-levels, far from the spaceport authorities that might ask questions about an Imperial fighter with non-standard modifications. The bay operator, a Rhodian with cybernetic eyes, took one look at the First Order vessel and quoted an exorbitant docking fee without blinking. "Triple rate for military hardware," the Rhodian clicked in accented basic. "See quintuple if you want me to forget I saw it." Anakin paid with credits he'd salvaged from the Crate wreckage, his mind already working through the problems ahead. He needed information about the current state of the galaxy, needed to find the Resistance, needed supplies, a better ship, and most critically, a way to locate Kylo Ren without announcing his presence to the entire First Order. The streets of Nar Shaddaa were a sensory assault. Neon signs in a dozen languages advertised everything from spice to cybernetic enhancements to discreet transport services. Species from across the galaxy crowded the walkways. Humans, Twi'leks, Salustans, even a few Wookiees moving through the crowds with practiced wariness. But what struck Anakin most was the atmosphere, not just the physical pollution that made his eyes water, but the spiritual weight pressing down on everything. Fear, exhaustion, the kind of bone-deep weariness that came from living under constant threat with no end in sight. He'd felt it before in the final years of the Clone Wars when even victory seemed hollow. Anakin pulled his hood up and moved through the crowds, reaching out carefully with the Force. He couldn't risk a broad search. If there were any Force sensitives nearby, particularly dark side users, a powerful emanation would draw attention like a beacon. Instead, he cast a subtle net, feeling for the currents of the Force and the beings moving through them. Most people registered as barely more than flickers, but here and there, brighter spots caught his attention. Not Jedi, there were no Jedi anymore, his stolen knowledge reminded him, but Force sensitives who'd never been trained. Their potential burning like embers that had never caught flame, and there, a presence that was deliberately suppressing itself. Trained, disciplined, trying very hard not to be noticed. Anakin altered his course, following the sensation through twisting corridors and down 3 levels to what appeared to be a cantina. The sign above the door advertised Maz's Place, all species welcome, though from the suspicious looks he received as he entered, that welcome clearly had limits. The cantina was dimly lit, filled with the kind of patrons who valued privacy and asked no questions. Anakin's eyes swept the room, cataloging exits and potential threats with combat instincts honed by years of war. And there, in a booth in the far corner, a woman, human, maybe 30 standard years, with short cropped dark hair and a scar running from her temple to her jawline. She wore nondescript clothing that could have been civilian or military, carefully positioned so she could watch both the main entrance and the kitchen exit. Her hand rested near her hip, where a blaster was almost certainly holstered. And she was Force sensitive, not powerful, but trained. Enough to know what Anakin was the moment his attention focused on her. Their eyes met across the room. Her hand moved fractionally toward her weapon. Anakin raised his hands slowly, palms out, and walked toward her booth with measured, non-threatening steps. "I'm not here to fight," he said quietly as he approached. "Then you're in the wrong part of the galaxy," she replied, her voice hard with the kind of edge that came from too many close calls. The First Order doesn't negotiate, and you," her eyes narrowed, scanning him from head to toe, "aren't dressed like any First Order officer I've seen." "I'm not First Order." Anakin slid into the booth across from her, keeping his hands visible on the table. "I'm looking for the Resistance." The woman's expression didn't change, but Anakin felt her presence in the Force sharpen, becoming more guarded. "Don't know what you're talking about. Resistance is dead. First Order made sure of that after Crate." "The Resistance isn't dead," Anakin said with quiet certainty. "Scattered maybe, hiding, but not dead. Hope doesn't die that easily." Something flickered in her eyes. Surprise, maybe, or recognition of words that sounded like propaganda but felt like truth. She leaned back and studying him with the intensity of someone trying to solve a puzzle. "You talk like a Jedi," she said finally, "but the Jedi are gone, have been for decades, and you're too young to have fought in the Clone Wars, so you can't be—" She stopped abruptly, her eyes widening. "Force, you look like—" "Like who?" Anakin pressed. She shook her head sharply as if clearing cobwebs. "Holovids I've seen, historical records. You look like Anakin Skywalker before—" She didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. "That's because I am Anakin Skywalker." The words hung in the air between them. The woman's hand moved back toward her blaster, and Anakin could feel the conflict raging through her presence in the Force. Disbelief warring with the evidence of her own senses, fear fighting against desperate, fragile hope. "That's impossible," she whispered. "The Anakin Skywalker became Darth Vader, died on the second Death Star 30 years ago, unless you're a clone or some kind of—" "The Force brought me here," Anakin interrupted, "from Mortis, from my own time. I know it sounds insane, I know you have no reason to believe me, but I've seen the files from Crate. I've seen what's happened to the galaxy, and I've seen what my grandson has become." The mention of Kylo Ren made her flinch. Her hand finally settled on her blaster, though she didn't draw it. Kylo Ren is hunting the last of us, him and his knights. If you're really who you claim to be, you're either here to help him finish the job, or I'm here to stop him, Anakin finished. To save him from the path I never should have walked. The woman studied him for a long moment, and Anakin could feel her reaching out with her limited Force sensitivity, trying to sense his intent. He lowered his mental shield slightly, letting her feel his sincerity, his determination, the bone-deep horror he felt at what Vader had done and what Kylo Ren was doing. Finally, she seemed to reach a decision. "My name is Jira Aston. I was one of Master Skywalker's final students before everything fell apart." The revelation hit Anakin like a physical blow. "You studied with Luke?" "For 3 years, Jira said, her voice tight with old pain. "I was there the night Ben Solo destroyed the temple, barely escaped with 6 others. We scattered, tried to survive, tried to hold on to what Master Skywalker taught us. Most of us are dead now, hunted down by Ren and his knights." Her jaw tightened. Master Skywalker disappeared. He went into exile, abandoned us when we needed him most. Anakin heard the bitterness in her words, understood it. Luke had trained these students, given them hope, and then when everything collapsed, he'd vanished. Where is he now? Dead for all I know, for all any of us know. Jira's fingers drummed on the table. After the First Order destroyed the Hosnian system, after Starkiller Base fell, there were rumors. Some said General Organa found him, that he came back for one final stand on Crate. But if he did, he didn't stay, didn't help rebuild, just gone again. The Force pulsed with Anakin's frustration and grief. His son, alive somewhere in the galaxy, hiding from the consequences of his failure while his students died and his nephew embraced darkness. I need to find the Resistance. Find Leia. General Organa is dead. The words were quiet, matter-of-fact, but they hit Anakin like a lightsaber through the chest. His daughter, the child he'd never met, never held, never apologized to, gone. When? The word came out strangled. 6 months ago. Natural causes, they said. Some of us think it was the Force, that she gave everything she had to hold the Resistance together and just burned out. Jira's expression softened slightly. She died believing in hope, believing we could still win. Anakin closed his eyes, grief washing through him. He'd been given this impossible chance, this temporal displacement, and he was still too late. Too late to save Padme, too late to apologize to Obi-Wan, too late to know his daughter, always too late. But the Resistance isn't gone, Jira continued. What's left of it regrouped after Crate. New leadership, smaller, more careful. We don't have the numbers or resources we did before, but we're still fighting. She leaned forward. If you're really Anakin Skywalker, if the Force really brought you here from the past, then maybe that's the sign we've been waiting for. I'm not here to lead the Resistance, Anakin said, opening his eyes. I'm here for Kylo Ren, for Ben, my grandson. You can't save him, Jira said flatly. Whatever Ben Solo was, he's gone. Kylo Ren killed him along with everyone else at the temple. No. The word came out with absolute certainty. I've seen the darkness. I know what it does, how it twists everything good in you. But I've also seen the records. Vader was redeemed. If a monster like Vader could come back to the light, then Ben can too. Jira's expression was skeptical. Master Skywalker tried to save him, tried to see the good in him. Look where that got us. Luke tried to prevent the darkness by destroying it, Anakin countered. That doesn't work. Darkness has to be faced, understood, and chosen against. Ben needs to see that there's another path, that Vader's legacy isn't what he thinks it is. And you think you can show him that? You, Vader's previous incarnation? I have to try. Anakin's hands clenched on the table. The Force didn't bring me here to watch another generation fall to the same mistakes. Help me find him. Help me reach him before it's too late. Jira was silent for a long moment, conflict clear on her face. Finally, she sighed. The resistance is gathering at Ryloth, secret base in the old mine systems. I was supposed to meet them there in 2 days, report on First Order movements in this sector. If you want to make your case, come with me. But I warn you, Commander Dameron and the others won't welcome you with open arms. They've learned the hard way that hope can be a weapon the enemy uses against you. I don't need a welcome. I need information. Ships. A way to confront Kylo Ren on terms that give me a chance to reach him. Anakin stood, and I need to move fast. The longer he walks the dark path, the harder it will be to bring him back. Jira stood as well, studying him with eyes that had seen too much for her age. You really believe you can save him? I have to. If I can't, if the Chosen One can't break this cycle, then what was the point of any of it? They left the cantina together, moving through Nar Shaddah's crowded streets toward the docking bays. Anakin could feel the Force moving around them, currents shifting in response to his presence. The galaxy was vast, broken, struggling under the weight of decades of war. But for the first time since arriving in this future, he felt purpose crystallizing. The Resistance needed hope. His grandson needed salvation. And somewhere out there, Luke was hiding from his failures. Anakin would find them all, would forge the broken pieces of this galaxy into something that could stand against the darkness. And he would face Kylo Ren not as Vader, not as the monster, but as Anakin Skywalker, the man his grandson never knew existed. As they reached Jira's ship, a battered Corellian freighter that had seen better decades, Anakin paused, reaching out through the Force one more time. The dark presence he'd felt on Crate was still there, distant but growing stronger. Kylo Ren was searching for something, hunting across the galaxy with the kind of obsession Anakin recognized from his own worst moments. He's looking for me, Anakin realized aloud. What? Jira stopped at the boarding ramp. Ben, Kylo Ren, he's searching for something in the Force. I thought it was random, but... Anakin's eyes widened with understanding. He felt me arrive, felt the temporal disruption when I came through. He knows something's changed. Jira's hand moved to her blaster. Then we need to move. Now, if he finds you before you're ready... No, Anakin interrupted, a plan forming. Let him find me. Let him come looking. When we meet, it won't be on a battlefield surrounded by soldiers. It will be what it should be, family confronting family. Did the grandfather saving the grandson from the same darkness that nearly consumed him. They boarded the ship, and as it lifted from Nar Shaddah's polluted atmosphere toward the stars beyond, Anakin felt the weight of destiny settling on his shoulders once more. The Force had brought him here for this moment, this confrontation. He would not fail his grandson the way Vader had failed his children. He would not let darkness win again. The hyperspace journey to Ryloth gave Anakin time to study the galaxy he'd been thrust into. Jira's ship had a functioning holonet terminal, and through it, he accessed years of news archives, propaganda broadcasts, and fragmented historical records. The picture that emerged was bleak. The First Order had risen from the ashes of the Empire with terrifying efficiency. What had taken Palpatine decades to build, they'd reconstructed in years. Fleets of Star Destroyers, legions of stormtroopers, and a brutality that made the old Empire look restrained. The destruction of the Hosnian system wasn't an aberration. It was a statement of intent. And at the center of it all, commanding the military with absolute authority, was Supreme Leader Kylo Ren. Anakin studied every image, every recording he could find. His grandson wore a mask similar to Vader's, but different, more primitive, almost tribal, with jagged lines that suggested barely controlled rage rather than mechanical necessity. When he removed it in rare footage, the face beneath was young, handsome, but twisted by anger and pain. Ben Solo looked like his mother, had her eyes, her intensity. But when he spoke, when he moved, Anakin saw echoes of himself. The recklessness, the passion, the desperate need to prove himself worthy of a legacy he didn't understand. "You've been watching those files for 6 hours, Jira said from the pilot's seat, pulling Anakin from his research. "We're about to drop out of hyperspace." Anakin closed the terminal and moved to the cockpit viewport. The mottled tunnel of hyperspace gave way to real stars. And there, a russet world with distinctive twin mountain ranges visible from orbit. "Ryloth, the Resistance knows we're coming?" Anakin asked. "I sent the codes before we jumped. They'll have fighters ready in case we're being followed." Jira's hands moved across the controls with practiced ease. "But General Skywalker, Anakin, you need to understand something before we land. These people have lost everything. Families, homes, their entire worlds. They've watched the First Order grind the galaxy under its boot for years. They don't trust easily, and they definitely don't trust anything connected to Vader. I'm not Vader. Not yet, according to your timeline. But you will be. That's your future, the one you're trying to prevent." She glanced at him. "How do we know saving you from that fate won't make things worse? Maybe Vader needed to exist. Maybe his redemption at the end was what saved Luke, changed history, and you might destroy the galaxy trying to fix it." The words hit harder because Anakin had been thinking the same thing. Every action had consequences. Every choice rippled forward through time. By being here, by changing things, he could be creating something even worse than Vader. But the Force had brought him here. That had to mean something. "I have to try," he said simply. The comm crackled to life. "Unidentified freighter. Transmit clearance codes and prepare for escort to landing zone 7. Jira complied, and moments later, 2 X-Wings materialized on their flanks. Newer models than Anakin remembered, sleeker and more aggressive in design. The fighters guided them down through Ryloth's atmosphere to a canyon system where camouflaged hangars had been carved into the rock. As they landed, Anakin could see the Resistance for what it truly was. A handful of ships, maybe 3 dozen fighters and personnel that numbered in the hundreds rather than thousands. This wasn't an army. This was a remnant, the last spark of hope in a galaxy that had forgotten what hope looked like. Jira lowered the boarding ramp. "Stay close. Let me do the talking until we know where we stand." They were met by a security detail, 6 soldiers in mismatched armor carrying blaster rifles, with the kind of casual competence that spoke of extensive combat experience. Behind them stood a human man in his late 30s, wearing an orange flight suit with commander's insignia. His dark hair was streaked with premature gray, and his eyes held the sharp intelligence of someone who'd survived by thinking 3 steps ahead. "Jira," he said, embracing her briefly before stepping back to study Anakin. "You said you were bringing valuable intelligence. You didn't say you were bringing ghosts." "Commander Dameron, this is—" "I know who he's supposed to be," Poe Dameron interrupted, circling Anakin slowly. "Seen enough historical hollows to recognize the face. Question is whether he's a clone, a Force illusion, or something the First Order cooked up to infiltrate us." "I'm Anakin Skywalker," Anakin said calmly. "The Force pulled me from Mortis, from my own time, and brought me here. I know it sounds impossible." "Impossible is what we deal with every day," Poe cut in. "Impossible odds, impossible missions. Impossibly lucky to still be alive." His hand rested on his blaster. "But we've also learned that the First Order is creative. Mind tricks, genetic manipulation, dark side illusions. They've tried it all. So forgive me if I'm not ready to throw a parade for Darth Vader's younger self showing up claiming he's here to help. Before Anakin could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the base. Red lights flashed, and soldiers scrambled to defensive positions with practiced urgency. "Report!" Poe barked into his comm. "First Order Star Destroyer just dropped out of hyperspace." A voice crackled back. "It's alone. No support vessels. It's... Commander, it's broadcasting a single name on all frequencies." "What name?" "Anakin Skywalker." The landing bay fell silent except for the wailing alarms. Poe's eyes locked on Anakin with sudden, dangerous understanding. "You led them here." "No," Anakin said, but even as he spoke, he felt it. That dark presence in the Force, the one he'd been sensing since Crate, now blazing like a sun overhead. Rage, obsession, desperate, consuming need. Kylo Ren. "He tracked me through the Force," Anakin realized aloud. "When I arrived in this timeline, he felt the disruption. He's been hunting me ever since. And you brought him straight to our base." Poe's blaster was in his hand now, though not quite pointed at Anakin. "We have maybe 36 fighters against a Star Destroyer. We can't..." "Incoming transmission," another voice interrupted. "It's him. It's Kylo Ren." "Put it through," Poe ordered. The hangar's hollow projector flickered to life, and there he was, Kylo Ren in full armor, his mask a dark mirror of Vader's legacy, but standing on what was clearly a Star Destroyer's bridge. His voice, when he spoke, was distorted by the mask but carried the weight of absolute authority. "I know you're there, Anakin Skywalker. I felt you appear in this galaxy like a wound in the Force itself. An anomaly, an impossibility." The masked head tilted slightly. "The grandfather I never knew. The man who became Vader before falling to weakness. You should have stayed in your own time." Anakin stepped forward, facing the hologram. "Ben Solo, I've seen what you've become, what you think you need to be, but it's built on lies, on a legacy you don't understand." The hologram flickered with what might have been surprise. "You dare speak that name? That weakness I shed along with everything else I was taught to value?" Rage crept into Kylo's voice. "I am more than Ben Solo ever could have been. I am Vader's true heir. I have finished what he started. I have become what he was always meant to be." "No," Anakin said quietly. "You've become what I was most afraid of becoming. You've let anger and pain define you. You've chosen darkness because you think it's your destiny. But destiny is a lie, Ben. We make our own choices." "You know nothing about my choices." Kylo's voice rose to a shout. "You weren't there when Luke Skywalker stood over me with ignited blade. Weren't there when the Jedi Temple burned. Weren't there when I learned that the legend of my grandfather was a lie, that Vader fell not to power but to sentiment." "Vader fell because love is stronger than hate," Anakin countered. "He saved his son, saved the galaxy, his redemption." "His redemption was weakness," Kylo roared. He had the Emperor defeated, had the galaxy in his grasp, and he threw it away for what? For Luke Skywalker, for the same Jedi who nearly murdered me in my sleep?" The pain in those words was palpable, bleeding through even the mask's distortion. Anakin felt it echo in the Force. Abandonment, betrayal, rage born from a wound that had never healed. "Luke made a mistake," Anakin said carefully. "A terrible mistake born from fear, but that doesn't mean I'm done with this conversation." Kylo's posture shifted, became predatory. "You will come to me, Anakin Skywalker. Come to my ship, face me, or I will reduce that pathetic resistance base to dust, and you along with it." "Don't," Poe hissed, but Anakin was already responding. "I'll come, but just me. You leave these people alone." "I leave them alone for now," Kylo corrected. Now, after I've dealt with you, I'll decide what to do with the insects who shelter you. You have 1 hour to reach my ship. If you're not aboard by then, I begin bombardment." The transmission cut out. The hangar erupted in argument. Poe was shouting about traps and suicide missions. Jira was insisting there had to be another way. Soldiers were running tactical scenarios that all ended with the base destroyed and the resistance finished. But Anakin wasn't listening to any of it. He was reaching out through the Force, touching that dark presence overhead, feeling the twisted mess of emotions churning beneath Kylo Ren's mask. Rage, yes. Power, certainly. But underneath, buried deep, pain, loss, a child's wounded cry that had never been answered. "I'm going," Anakin announced, cutting through the chaos. "That's insane," Poe said flatly. "It's obviously a trap. He'll kill you, or torture you, or turn you, or—" "He's my grandson, my blood, my responsibility." Anakin met Poe's eyes. "The Force brought me here for this, to face him, to show him that Vader's legacy doesn't have to be his future. And if you fail? If he kills you, or worse? Then at least I tried to break the cycle." Anakin turned toward his borrowed TIE fighter. "Give me a ship with working comms. If I can't reach him, if it goes bad, at least you'll know. You can evacuate before he makes good on his threat." Jira grabbed his arm. "Master Skywalker, Anakin, he's not like the Padawans who fell. He's had years to marinate in the darkness. He's killed thousands, destroyed worlds. You can't just talk him back to the light." "Maybe not," Anakin admitted, "but I can show him that there's still a choice. That destiny isn't written in stone. That's more than anyone else has given him." He pulled away gently and headed for the fighter. Behind him, he heard Poe giving rapid orders. Shields to maximum, fighters ready to scramble, evacuation protocols on standby. The Resistance was preparing for the worst while hoping for the impossible. As Anakin climbed into the cockpit of a reconditioned X-Wing, he felt the weight of every choice that had led to this moment. The Force had pulled him from Mortis, shown him the nightmare of what he would become, and thrown him decades into a future where that nightmare's echo threatened to consume another generation. Now he would face that echo, would look into his grandson's eyes and show him the truth, that Anakin Skywalker still existed, that redemption was possible before the fall, that love was stronger than the legacy of hate. The X-Wing lifted from the hangar, climbing toward the Star Destroyer that hung in orbit like a predator waiting for its prey. As the massive ship grew larger in his viewport, Anakin whispered a prayer to the Force, not for victory, but for wisdom, for the right words, for the strength to save a young man who had been told his entire life that darkness was his birthright. The docking bay of the Star Destroyer opened before him like a maw, and Anakin Skywalker flew into the heart of his own dark legacy, determined to break the cycle that had already cost the galaxy so much. Or die trying. The Star Destroyer's hangar was a cathedral of imperial design, vast, imposing, designed to make anyone entering feel insignificant. Stormtroopers lined the landing platform in perfect formation, their armor gleaming white under harsh overhead lights. At their head stood figures clad in black, the Knights of Ren, Kylo's personal enforcers, each one force-sensitive and deadly. Anakin powered down the X-Wing and descended the ladder, his boots hitting the deck with a metallic clang that echoed through the cavernous space. He kept his hands visible, lightsaber clipped to his belt but untouched. Every trooper had a weapon trained on him. Every knight radiated hostile intent in the Force. But it was the figure standing at the far end of the platform that commanded Anakin's attention. Kylo Ren stood motionless, his mask reflecting the hangar lights in sharp angles. He was tall, taller than Anakin by several inches, and his presence in the Force was a maelstrom of conflicting emotions barely held in check. power radiated from him, raw and undisciplined compared to Vader's cold precision, but no less dangerous for its chaos. "Anakin Skywalker," Kylo said, his voice distorted by the mask. "The man who would become Vader. Do you know how long I've studied you? How many times I've meditated on your transformation? You were weak, like all Jedi, bound by their codes, their sentimentality. It took losing everything for you to become what you should have been from the beginning." "I've seen what I became," Anakin replied, walking forward slowly. "Seen the records of Vader's atrocities, the younglings I murdered, the Jedi I hunted, the billions who died under the Empire's boot. That wasn't strength, Ben. That was slavery to darkness." "Don't call me that name." Kylo's hand shot up, and suddenly Anakin felt the Force clamp around his throat, not choking but restraining, a demonstration of power. "Ben Solo is dead. I killed him myself, along with every other weakness I inherited." Anakin didn't fight the grip. Instead, he looked directly at where he sensed Kylo's eyes behind the mask and spoke quietly. "You can't kill who you are, Ben. You can bury it, deny it, run from it, but it's still there, still part of you. I can feel it in the Force." The grip tightened for a moment, then released abruptly. Kylo turned away, his cape swirling. "You understand nothing. You come from a time before consequence, before choice. In my timeline, you've already made your decisions. They already become the monster. You don't get to lecture me about paths when yours is already written." "That's why I'm here," Anakin said, following as Kylo strode toward a turbolift. The Knights of Ren moved to follow, but Kylo waved them back with an irritated gesture. "The Force pulled me from my time for a reason, to show me what I would become so I could change it, and to show you that Vader's legacy doesn't have to be yours." They entered the lift alone, and as it began ascending through the ship, Kylo finally turned to face him fully. "You think you can change destiny? The Force itself showed you your future. You will fall. You will become Vader. Nothing you do in this timeline will change that in yours." "Maybe not," Anakin admitted. "Maybe I go back and everything happens exactly as recorded. But you're here, now, making choices in real time. Your destiny isn't written yet. You can still choose differently." "I have chosen." Kylo's hand moved to his mask, and with a hiss of releasing seals, he removed it. Anakin found himself staring at his grandson's true face for the first time. Ben Solo was young, maybe 30, with features that blended Leia's intensity with what must have been Han's roguish angles. But it was the eyes that struck Anakin most, dark, haunted, burning with barely controlled rage. And beneath that rage, barely visible, pain. Such profound, aching pain that it made Anakin's chest tighten. "This is what you see when you look at me?" Ben asked, his voice no longer distorted. It was younger than Anakin expected, rough with emotion. "The monster? The supreme leader? Or do you see what I see when I look in the mirror? Someone who was betrayed by everyone who should have protected him." "I see my grandson," Anakin said quietly. "I see someone who's been hurt badly enough to think that inflicting that hurt on the galaxy is the only way to make it stop." Ben's jaw clenched. "You know nothing about my pain." "I know what it's like to lose someone you love," Anakin countered. "To feel powerless, to have nightmares that show you terrible futures, to be told you're special, chosen, destined for greatness, and then have everyone around you fear what you might become." Something flickered in Ben's eyes. Recognition, unwilling but undeniable. The lift opened onto a corridor that led to what was clearly private quarters. Ben led him into a chamber that was part throne room, part meditation space. And covering the walls were artifacts that made Anakin's blood run cold. Vader's legacy preserved like holy relics. A section of Vader's armor scorched and damaged. Pieces of a tie advanced. Schematics for the Death Star. And there, on a pedestal in the center of the room, Vader's helmet, melted and twisted from the funeral pyre, but still recognizable. "This is what I've built my power on," Ben said, moving to stand before the helmet. "The legacy of Darth Vader, the strongest Force user in history. I commune with this, speak to it, seek guidance from the one who understood that sentiment is weakness, that only through passion and strength can order be imposed on chaos." Anakin approached the helmet slowly, his heart breaking at the sight. This twisted metal represented everything he'd been shown he would become, and his grandson worshipped it like a god. "You're speaking to an empty shell," Anakin said. "There's nothing in there, Ben. No ghost, no guidance, just your own anger reflected back at you." "You're wrong." Ben's hand hovered over the helmet possessively. "I've felt his presence, felt him guide me, show me what I need to do to complete his legacy." "What you felt is the dark side," Anakin countered. "It feeds on anger and pain, tells you what you want to hear, makes you think isolation and power are the same as strength." He moved closer, his voice gentle but firm. "Your grandfather, Vader, at the end, he rejected all of this, chose love over power, saved his son. That's the real legacy, not this." Ben spun on him, rage contorting his features. He was weak. He had the Emperor defeated, had unlimited power, and he threw it away. For what? For Luke Skywalker, the same Jedi who stood over me with an ignited lightsaber, ready to murder me in my sleep. There it was, the wound at the center of everything. Anakin could feel it bleeding in the Force, the moment that had shattered Ben Solo and birthed Kylo Ren. "Luke made a terrible mistake," Anakin said carefully. "He saw darkness in you and reacted out of fear. But Ben, that moment of fear doesn't erase everything else, doesn't justify..." "Doesn't justify what?" Ben's voice rose. "Destroying the temple that would have turned me into another tool for the Jedi, killing the knights who followed me willingly, helping build an order that brings actual stability to the galaxy, instead of the Republic's corrupt democracy. Doesn't justify the Hosnian system," Anakin said quietly. 5 planets, billions of lives, gone in an instant. Was that stability, Ben? Or was that rage wearing the mask of purpose? Ben's face went still, the rage crystallizing into something colder. They were weak. The New Republic was corrupt, inefficient, repeating all the same mistakes that led to the Clone Wars. I ended their suffering swiftly. That's more mercy than they deserved. "That's what I told myself too," Anakin said, his voice heavy. "When I marched on the temple, when I killed the younglings, I told myself it was necessary, that I was bringing order, that the Jedi had become too dangerous. But it was a lie, Ben. A lie the darkness tells to make you think you're still in control." For a moment, just a moment, uncertainty flickered across Ben's face. Then it was gone, replaced by cold resolve. "You're not Vader yet. You don't understand what it takes to seize power, to hold it. You're still soft, still bound by Jedi weakness." "Then show me," Anakin challenged. "You claim to be Vader's heir. You claim to understand the dark side better than the man who actually became Vader. Prove it. Show me this strength you think I lack." Ben's eyes widened slightly, then narrowed. "You want me to strike you down? To prove that I'm beyond redemption?" "I want you to try," Anakin said, his hand moving to his lightsaber, "because I don't think you're as far gone as you claim. I think underneath all this rage and pain, Ben Solo is still fighting, still hoping someone will see him, will save him from the path he's trapped himself on." "You're wrong." Ben ignited his lightsaber, a blade that crackled and sparked with unstable energy, red and violent. "Ben Solo is dead, and I'll prove it by showing you what you'll become. The power of the dark side, the strength you'll only find through rage." Anakin ignited his own blade, steady, blue, a shaft of pure light, in the darkness of the chamber. "Then come, grandson, show me this legacy you think you've inherited." They circled each other, the air crackling with Force energy. Anakin could feel Ben's power, raw, uncontrolled, burning like a wildfire. Powerful, yes, but unstable, lacking the discipline that would make it truly dangerous. Ben struck first, his blade coming down in a powerful overhead strike. Anakin deflected it easily, noting the raw strength but poor form. Ben fought like a berserker, each strike fueled by emotion rather than technique. "You're stronger than I expected," Ben admitted, pressing the attack. "No, the holo records didn't show this level of skill." "I was trained by the best Jedi of my generation," Anakin replied, his defensive form textbook perfect. "Obi-Wan Kenobi, your great uncle in another life. He would be heartbroken to see what you've become." The mention of family made Ben's attacks more vicious. Anakin began to counter, his movements fluid and precise. In the Clone Wars, he'd been known as one of the greatest duelists in the Order. That skill hadn't diminished. "You're holding back," Ben snarled, their blades locked. "Fight me with real power. Show me the anger that will make you Vader." "I don't need anger to defeat you," Anakin said calmly, breaking the lock and spinning away. "That's what you don't understand. The dark side makes you think rage is strength, but real power comes from control, from clarity, from knowing who you are and choosing your path consciously." He went on the offensive, his blade a blue blur as he drove Ben back across the chamber. Each strike was measured, controlled, demonstrating superiority without humiliation. He could have ended the duel a dozen times, but didn't. This wasn't about winning a fight. It was about teaching a lesson. Ben's frustration mounted. He reached out with the Force, pulling artifacts from the walls and hurling them at Anakin. But Anakin had been deflecting objects in combat since he was a Padawan. His blade cut through incoming debris while his own Force presence batted others aside. "You're not even trying!" Ben shouted, abandoning lightsaber technique entirely and attacking with pure Force fury. Waves of dark side energy slammed into Anakin, attempting to overwhelm him through raw power. But Anakin planted his feet and met the assault with his own Force presence, not dark but not purely light either. Balanced, the way the Chosen One was meant to be. The chamber groaned under the strain of their duel, artifacts cracking, the viewport beginning to spiderweb. And then Anakin did something Ben clearly didn't expect. He lowered his defenses. The dark side energy washed over him, and yes, it hurt. Burned like acid in his veins, but he didn't strike back. Didn't retaliate. Just stood there, weathering the storm, looking at his grandson with compassion rather than judgment. "What are you doing?" Ben demanded, his attack faltering. "Fight back. Show me the power." "No," Anakin said simply, "because that's not strength, Ben. Striking someone who won't defend themselves isn't power. It's just cruelty wearing power's mask." Ben's assault cut off abruptly. He stood there, lightsaber trembling in his hand, his face a mask of confusion and rage, and something else, something that looked dangerously like doubt. "You're trying to manipulate me," Ben said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Using Jedi mind tricks, making me think." "I'm showing you the truth," Anakin interrupted. "The dark side has lied to you, Ben. Told you that the only way to be strong is to cut away everything good in yourself. But that's not strength, that's self-destruction. Vader learned that too late. You don't have to." "Stop." Ben's voice cracked. "Stop talking. Stop. You're not real. You're some trick of the Force, a test." "I'm real." Anakin deactivated his lightsaber and took a step forward. "I'm your grandfather, the man before the fall. And I'm telling you that there's still time, still a choice. You can step away from this path." There is no path away. Ben's mask of control shattered, and suddenly he was just a young man, terrified and furious and lost. "Don't you understand? I've done too much. killed too many. The galaxy knows Kylo Ren as a monster. There's no redemption for what I've become." "Vader thought the same thing," Anakin said gently. "For 20 years he thought it was too late, that he'd gone too far. But at the end, he chose love anyway, chose to save his son even knowing it would kill him. If he could find redemption, so can you." Ben stood frozen, his lightsaber extinguished, his hands shaking. For a moment, one precious, fragile moment, Anakin thought he'd broken through, thought he'd reached the wounded child beneath the Supreme Leader's armor. Then alarms blared throughout the ship. Ben's comlink crackled to life. "Supreme Leader, the Resistance is attempting to flee. Multiple ships launching from the planet's surface." The moment shattered. Ben's face hardened, the vulnerability vanishing behind a wall of cold fury. "I knew it. They used you as a distraction, bought time for evacuation while you kept me occupied with your lies." "Ben, no, I didn't know." "Silence!" Ben's force presence exploded outward, slamming Anakin back against the wall. "You're just like all the others, using me, manipulating me, trying to make me weak." His mask went back on, hiding his face once more. "I gave you a chance to prove the dark side's strength. You failed. And now the Resistance will burn for your deception." "Please," Anakin struggled against the Force restraint. "Don't do this. They're just trying to survive. Your mother died hoping you'd come back to the light. Don't prove her wrong." The mention of Leia made Kylo Ren pause. For a heartbeat, the Force grip loosened. Then it tightened with renewed fury. "My mother abandoned me to her crusade. My father abandoned me for his smuggling. Luke abandoned me by trying to murder me. And you're not even real. Just a ghost from a past that will never change." Kylo strode toward the door. "The Knights will escort you to a cell. You'll watch as I destroy what's left of the Resistance. Then we'll discuss what to do with an anomaly that shouldn't exist." He left without looking back, and the Knights of Ren entered, their weapons trained on Anakin. He could fight them, could probably cut through them with enough effort. But doing so would only prove Kylo right. That power and violence were the only answers. As they led him through the corridors toward the brig, Anakin reached out through the Force one more time, felt his grandson's presence retreating toward the bridge, felt the turmoil beneath the mask of control. Felt something else too, a tiny crack in the armor, a place where doubt had taken root. He hadn't saved Ben, not yet, but he'd planted a seed, shown him that another way existed, that Vader's redemption was real, not weakness. Now he just had to survive long enough to see if that seed would grow, or wither in the darkness his grandson had wrapped around himself like a shield. The brig of a First Order Star Destroyer was designed for maximum psychological impact. Small, featureless cells with energy shields that hummed with malevolent efficiency. No windows, no connection to the outside universe, just cold metal and the knowledge that you were trapped in the belly of a machine designed for conquest. Anakin sat cross-legged on the cell's floor, centered himself, and reached out through the Force. The ship was in chaos. He could feel it, the rush of personnel to battle stations, the spike of adrenaline as gunners prepared to fire on fleeing Resistance vessels, the cold determination radiating from Kylo Ren on the bridge. His grandson was preparing to make good on his threat, to destroy the last remnants of hope in the galaxy. But Anakin also felt something else. Cracks in the ship's discipline. Whispers of doubt among the crew. The First Order projected absolute certainty, but beneath that facade, many of its members were just people following orders, uncertain whether those orders were right, but too afraid to question them. And in the Force, he felt other presences, faint, scattered across the ship. Force sensitives who'd been conscripted or captured, their abilities used to enhance the First Order's operations. Some barely knew what they were. Others had been broken, their spirits crushed into serving the darkness. One presence in particular caught his attention, close by, in a cell maybe 3 down from his own. Young, female, terrified but not broken, reaching out desperately in the Force like a drowning person, searching for something solid to grasp. Anakin extended his presence toward her carefully, making contact as gently as he could. "I'm here. You're not alone." The response was immediate, desperate. Who are you? Are you real?" "I'm real. My name is Anakin Skywalker. I'm a prisoner like you. What's your name?" A hesitation, then, "Kira. They took me from Corellia 6 months ago. Said I had abilities they could use. I've been trying to escape ever since, but the guards are distracted right now," Anakin sent. "The ship is preparing for battle. If we're going to move, it has to be now. Can you reach the control panel outside your cell?" Maybe. I've never tried to move things with my mind. I don't know how." "The Force is part of you," Anakin guided. "You don't push it or force it. You ask it. Reach out with your feelings, sense the panel, feel its mechanisms, then simply will it to open." He felt her trying, struggling. The Force around her cell flickering with unfocused energy. Then, success. Her cell door hissed open. "I did it." Her mental voice was filled with shock and triumph. Good. Now mine. 3rd cell to your right. Same technique." Moments later, his own cell opened. Anakin stepped out into the corridor to find a young woman, maybe 19, dressed in prisoner grays and looking at him with wide eyes. "You're really him," Kira whispered. "The hollows in the archives. You're Anakin Skywalker. But that's impossible. You died decades ago." "Long story," Anakin said, moving to the security console. His mechanical hand interfaced with the systems easily. First Order security was sophisticated, but Anakin had been slicing Imperial systems before the Empire even existed. How many other prisoners with Force sensitivity are on this ship? 6 that I know of, maybe more. Kira hovered near him, her eyes darting to the corridor entrance. "But we can't just free them and escape. There are thousands of troops on this ship. We'd never make it to the hangar." "We're not going to the hangar," Anakin said, his fingers flying across the console. "Not yet. First we're going to the bridge." "That's insane. Kylo Ren is on the bridge. He'll kill us." "Maybe." Anakin finished his work and turned to face her. "But he's about to destroy what's left of the Resistance. I can't let that happen. I won't abandon them to die while I run for safety." Kira stared at him for a long moment, then something hardened in her expression. "My family was on Hosnian Prime. My mother, my little brother. They died when Starkiller Base fired. If you're going after Ren, I'm coming with you." Anakin wanted to tell her no, to send her to safety, but he saw the determination in her eyes, felt her resolve in the Force. She'd lost everything to Kylo Ren's crusade. She deserved to fight back. "Stay close, stay quiet. If fighting starts, protect yourself first." He handed her a guard's blaster rifle from the security locker. "And Kira, the Force will guide you if you let it. Trust your instincts." They moved through the Star Destroyer's corridors like ghosts, Anakin using the Force to sense patrol routes and guide them through maintenance passages. 3 times they encountered guards. 3 times Anakin used a subtle Force suggestion to make them believe they were authorized personnel. How are you doing that?" Kira whispered after the 3rd guard walked past without seeing them clearly. "The Force can influence the weak-minded," Anakin explained. "These troops are conditioned to follow orders, not question authority. A small push and they see what they expect to see." They reached a service corridor that ran parallel to the bridge. Through the walls, Anakin could feel Kylo's presence, cold, focused, radiating dark authority, and he could feel the battle beginning. Turbo lasers opening fire, TIE fighters launching in pursuit. The Resistance ships scattering, desperately trying to make the jump to hyperspace before the Star Destroyer could destroy them. "We're running out of time," Anakin muttered. He found an access panel and pried it open, revealing a crawl space that maintenance droids used. This leads directly to the bridge. When we emerge, there will be approximately 20 personnel, including Kylo Ren and at least 2 Knights of Ren. The moment we appear, all attention will be on us. Then what's the plan? Kira asked. I get Kylo's attention. You get to the weapons control station and override the targeting systems. Make it so they can't fire on the resistance ships. I don't know how to... The Force will guide you, Anakin said with more confidence than he felt. Trust it. Trust yourself. They crawled through the maintenance shaft, the sounds of battle growing louder. Anakin could feel each resistance ship that winked out, not destroyed, but making the jump to hyperspace. They were escaping. Enough of them were making it, but not all. He felt one ship's engine fail, felt its desperate evasive maneuvers as TIE fighters closed in, felt the crew's terror as they realized they weren't going to make it. No more, Anakin thought grimly, no more death because of my legacy. The maintenance shaft opened onto the bridge through a ceiling access panel. Anakin pushed it aside and dropped down into the command center of the First Order Star Destroyer. For a moment, everyone froze. Officers stared. Guards reached for weapons, and at the center of it all, standing before the massive viewport with his back to them, Kylo Ren went absolutely still. Hello, grandson, Anakin said calmly. We need to talk about your anger management issues. Kylo turned slowly, his masked face betraying no emotion, but his presence in the Force exploded with rage. How did you... The guards were supposed to... He gestured sharply, and 2 Knights of Ren moved to flank him. It doesn't matter. You've just made your execution easier to justify. I'm not here to fight you, Anakin said, even as he felt Kira moving behind him, using the chaos and confusion to slip toward the weapons station. I'm here to stop you from making the same mistakes I would have made. These people fleeing, they're not your enemies. They're your mother's legacy, your family's hope. My mother is dead, Kylo said flatly. Her hope died with her. Now there's only the reality of power. He raised his hand toward the weapons officer. Destroy that crippled transport. No survivors. No, Anakin said, and the Force erupted from him. It wasn't a gentle suggestion this time. It was a command backed by the full power of the Chosen One. The weapons officer's hand froze inches from the firing control. His entire body locked in place by Anakin's will. Every person on the bridge felt it, the sheer weight of Force power radiating from the man in Jedi robes. Guards stumbled, officers gasped. Even the Knights of Ren took an involuntary step backward. Kylo Ren stood rigid, his fists clenched. Impossible. That level of power, Vader never... I'm not Vader yet, Anakin said, maintaining the Force restraint on the weapons officer while simultaneously reaching out to sense the crippled transport. It was close. So close to making the jump if it could just buy a few more seconds. And unlike Vader, I still remember what the Jedi taught me. That power isn't about domination, it's about protection, about choosing to defend rather than destroy. He felt Kira reach the weapons station, her fingers flying across controls she barely understood. But the Force guiding her movements. One by one, targeting systems began to fail. Not obviously enough to trigger alerts, but enough to buy precious seconds. The crippled transport's engines flared, its hyperdrive engaged. It vanished into the safety of hyperspace. Enough! Kylo's lightsaber ignited, and he moved with blinding speed, not toward Anakin, but toward Kira. He'd sensed what she was doing, understood the sabotage. Anakin was faster. He force-pulled Kira away from the station an instant before Kylo's blade would have cut her down, dragging her across the bridge to his side. His own lightsaber snapped to life, blue plasma meeting unstable red as Kylo redirected his strike. "You dare," Kylo hissed, their blades locked. "You dare interfere with my command on my ship?" "Your command is built on fear and pain," Anakin shot back. "But that's not strength, Ben. That's just a frightened child lashing out at a galaxy that hurt him." The words hit harder than any blade. Kylo's attack faltered for a split second, long enough for Anakin to break the lock and sweep his grandson's legs out from under him with a force-enhanced kick. Kylo rolled with the impact, coming up in a defensive crouch, but his composure was cracking. "I am not a child," he roared, and the bridge viewport behind him began to crack under the pressure of his rage. "I am Supreme Leader of the First Order. I am—" "Lost?" Anakin finished gently, his blade lowering slightly. "You're lost, Ben. Drowning in anger because it's easier than facing the pain underneath. I know because I've been there, standing at the edge of that same darkness, telling myself that rage was strength. That power would fill the emptiness inside." The Knights of Ren moved to intervene, but Kylo stopped them with a sharp gesture. His attention was fixed entirely on Anakin, his breath coming hard and fast behind the mask. "You don't know anything," Kylo said, but his voice had lost its certainty. "You haven't lived it, haven't been betrayed by everyone you trusted." "I was betrayed by my own future," Anakin countered. "Shown that I would become a monster, told that my destiny was darkness and suffering. But I'm here now, choosing differently, proving that destiny can be changed, that the Force gives us choices even when it feels like there are none." The bridge was utterly silent except for the hum of their lightsabers and the distant sounds of the Resistance completing their escape. Officers stood frozen, unsure whether to intervene or flee. The Knights of Ren waited for orders that didn't come, and Kylo Ren stood before his grandfather, torn between the darkness he'd embraced and the crack of light that was beginning to shine through. "If you really believe that," Kylo finally said, his voice barely above a whisper, "then prove it. Come with me. Let me show you the galaxy as it truly is, broken, chaotic, needing the order only the strong can provide. Let me show you why Vader's path was necessary." It was an offer, not a trap, Anakin sensed, but a genuine request. Kylo wanted someone to understand him, to validate his choices, to tell him that the darkness he'd embraced was justified. Anakin looked at his grandson, really looked at him, and saw the desperate child beneath the Supreme Leader's armor, saw Ben Solo still fighting, still hoping for salvation even as he pushed everyone away. "I'll stay," Anakin said slowly, "not to validate your choices, but to show you alternatives, to be what no one else has been, someone who doesn't abandon you but also doesn't let you destroy yourself unchallenged." Kylo's presence in the Force rippled with shock and suspicion. "You'd stay on a First Order vessel, be my prisoner." "I'd stay as your grandfather," Anakin corrected. "No prison necessary, just let me be here. Let me show you that someone from Vader's bloodline can choose differently." For a long moment, Kylo said nothing. Then, with visible effort, he deactivated his lightsaber. "The girl goes back to the brig. You—" He paused, seeming to struggle with the words. "Will be given guest quarters, under guard. One wrong move, and both of you die." "Fair enough," Anakin said, deactivating his own blade. He looked at Kira, who was staring at him like he'd lost his mind. "It's okay. Trust me." As guards moved forward to escort Kira away, she leaned close and whispered, "I hope you know what you're doing." "So do I," Anakin admitted. Kylo turned away, facing the cracked viewport that now showed nothing but stars. The Resistance had escaped. His immediate objective had failed. And his grandfather, the man who would become Vader, had stayed by choice, not compulsion. "You'll regret this," Kylo said, his voice carefully controlled. When you see what the galaxy really needs, you'll understand why Vader's path was the only option. Maybe, Anakin replied, or maybe I'll show you that even Vader at the end chose love over power. That redemption is always possible, even for those who think they've gone too far. In the silence that followed, the Star Destroyer's engines thrummed, carrying them away from Ryloth and toward whatever future waited in the stars ahead. Anakin had made his choice: stay with his grandson, fight the darkness not with a blade, but with presence and truth. He just hoped it would be enough. The quarters Anakin was given were sparse but not uncomfortable. A converted officer's suite with a viewport overlooking the endless void, a meditation mat, and basic amenities. 2 stormtroopers stood guard outside at all times, and Anakin knew surveillance systems monitored his every movement. But Kylo Ren had given him freedom of a sort. Not physical freedom, but something more valuable: access. Over the next 3 days, as the Star Destroyer traveled through hyperspace to coordinates Kylo wouldn't reveal, Anakin was summoned repeatedly to the Supreme Leader's private chambers, sometimes to debate philosophy, sometimes to observe Kylo's command decisions, sometimes just to sit in silence while his grandson meditated before Vader's broken helmet, seeking guidance from ghosts that didn't exist. "Tell me about the Clone Wars," Kylo said on the second day, his mask off, his scarred face illuminated by the red glow of emergency lighting he preferred. The Jedi called it a war for peace. How many billions died for that peace? Too many, Anakin admitted. They sat across from each other in what passed for Kylo's throne room, though it felt more like a monk's cell decorated with instruments of war. Every battle I fought, I told myself we were saving lives, protecting the Republic, but each victory just led to more war, more death. Exactly, Kylo leaned forward, his dark eyes intense. The Jedi's peace was an illusion. Democracy is chaos pretending to be order. The Republic fell because it was weak, corrupt, indecisive. The empire that replaced it, Vader's empire, brought actual stability, a real order. Through fear, Anakin countered. Through subjugation. That's not order, Ben. That's tyranny with efficient paperwork. Is it tyranny if it saves more lives than it costs? Kylo challenged. Under the Republic, how many worlds suffered because the Senate couldn't decide whether to act? How many species were enslaved while politicians debated? The Empire acted decisively, effectively, and destroyed Alderaan. Anakin shot back. An entire planet, billions dead in an instant to demonstrate power. Was that decisive effectiveness or just monstrous? Kylo's jaw tightened. Alderaan was Tarkin's decision. Vader opposed it. Did he stop it? The question hung in the air. Kylo looked away, his fingers drumming on the arm of his chair. No, he didn't. Because by then, Vader had convinced himself that the ends justified the means, that enough power could solve any problem, that feeling nothing was better than feeling everything. Anakin's voice softened. But it was a lie, Ben. The armor didn't make him strong, it just made him numb. Before Kylo could respond, his comlink chirped. He listened briefly, his expression hardening. We're approaching the Mustafar system. You wanted to understand why Vader's path was necessary. I'll show you. Mustafar. The name sent ice through Anakin's veins. He knew that name from the fragmented knowledge the Force had given him. The volcanic world where Vader had been born, where Anakin Skywalker had burned away, and the machine that was Darth Vader had risen from the ashes. The Star Destroyer dropped out of hyperspace to reveal a world of fire and shadow. Lava rivers carved through black stone. The atmosphere glowed red with heat and particulate matter. It was beautiful in a terrible way, a world that represented transformation through destruction. Vader's fortress is still here, Kylo said as they stood before the viewport. Mostly ruins now, but I've maintained it, studied it. The architects designed it to channel dark side energy, to amplify power through the planet's suffering. He turned to Anakin. This is where you'll become Vader, where Obi-Wan will leave you burning, where everything you fear will come to pass. Anakin felt the truth of it in the Force. This world was significant to his future. The darkness here recognized him, called to him, promised power if he would just embrace what he was meant to become. "Why bring me here?" Anakin asked quietly. "To show you that destiny is inescapable," Kylo replied. "You can make different choices all you want. Fight against what you know is coming, but the Force itself has shown you this future. It will happen. The only question is whether you waste energy fighting it or embrace it." They took a shuttle down to the surface, accompanied by 2 Knights of Ren and a security detail. The fortress emerged from the volcanic landscape like a dark fang, sharp, imposing, designed to intimidate. Parts of it had collapsed, but the core structure remained intact. Inside, the air was thick with dark side energy. Anakin felt it pressing against him, testing him, searching for weaknesses it could exploit. The fortress had been built to corrupt, to transform whoever dwelled within into a weapon of darkness. Kylo led him through corridors lined with ancient Sith artifacts, through meditation chambers where the walls themselves seemed to whisper promises of power, and finally to a central chamber where a massive Kyber crystal pulsed with corrupted red light. "This is what Vader built," Kylo said, his voice echoing in the vast space. "A fortress that turns pain into power, suffering into strength." He understood that the galaxy runs on conflict, that peace is just the absence of resolution. By embracing the dark side completely, he became powerful enough to bring order through force. "He became powerful enough to terrify the galaxy," Anakin corrected. "That's not the same as bringing order. Fear doesn't create stability. It just makes everyone wait for the moment the strong show weakness." "Then show me an alternative." Kylo's voice rose, your frustration bleeding through. "You keep saying there's another way, but look at history. The Jedi tried their way for 1,000 generations. They fell. The Republic tried democracy. It became corrupt and collapsed. The rebellion fought the Empire and won. And within 30 years, the First Order rose because the new Republic was too weak to maintain peace." He moved closer, his presence in the Force pressing against Anakin's like a physical weight. "Every path except absolute strength has failed, Grandfather. Vader understood this. I understand this. When will you?" Before Anakin could answer, the fortress shuddered. Alarms began blaring, and the Knights of Ren immediately moved to defensive positions. "Report," Kylo barked into his comlink. "Supreme Leader, we're detecting multiple hyperspace signatures entering the system. Resistance vessels, at least 24. They're targeting the Star Destroyer." Kylo's eyes widened, then narrowed with understanding and rage. "The prisoner, the girl, she must have transmitted our coordinates before we locked her in the brig." He turned to Anakin. "You knew. You planned this." "No," Anakin said honestly. "I didn't know. But Kira, she's smart, Force-sensitive. If she found a way to signal for help, good for her." "Good for her?" Kylo's hand moved to his lightsaber. "She's led the Resistance into a trap. My Star Destroyer has enough firepower to obliterate their entire fleet. She's killed them all." He was already running toward the shuttle, the Knights following. Anakin raced after them, his mind calculating possibilities. The Resistance shouldn't be here. This was suicide, unless they'd come for something specific. Yeah, unless they'd come for him, or for Kira. The shuttle launched back toward orbit, breaking through the volcanic atmosphere to reveal a battle already in progress. The Star Destroyer was surrounded by Resistance vessels, X-Wings, Y-Wings, a handful of larger cruisers that looked like they'd been patched together from scrap. They were outnumbered and outgunned, but they were fighting with desperate courage. "Destroy them," Kylo ordered as they docked with the Star Destroyer. All of them, no survivors. "Ben, wait!" Anakin started, but Kylo was already striding toward the bridge, his presence in the Force radiating cold fury. They reached the bridge to find chaos. A tactical officer was shouting coordinates. Gunners were tracking targets. TIE fighters were launching in waves. And in the center of it all, displayed on the main screen, she was a familiar freighter, battered, ancient, but unmistakable. The Millennium Falcon. Anakin's breath caught. That ship. He knew it from the files he'd studied. It had been Han Solo's ship, his grandson's father, and it was here, diving through the First Order's defensive screen like it had done this 1,000 times before. "The Falcon," Kylo breathed, and for the first time since Anakin had met him, his grandson's voice held something other than rage or cold command. It held pain, raw, bleeding pain. "He's dead. My father is dead. I killed him myself on Starkiller Base. So who—" The comlink crackled with a voice that cut through the battle noise like a blade. "Kylo Ren, Ben, I know you can hear this. Luke Skywalker, Anakin's son, the Jedi Master who'd tried to rebuild the Order and failed. The man who'd exiled himself after losing his nephew to darkness. And now he was here, flying his dead brother-in-law's ship, charging into impossible odds to— What? What could Luke possibly hope to accomplish here? "We came for Anakin Skywalker," Luke's voice continued, calm despite the chaos of battle. "The Force showed me his arrival, showed me that he's with you, Ben, and I'm asking you, as your uncle, as someone who loved you, let him go. Let them both go. The prisoners you've taken don't need to die." "You have no right to ask me for anything," Kylo roared at the comm station. "You tried to murder me, betrayed everything you claimed to stand for, and now you come here pretending to care, pretending you have the moral authority to—" "I made a mistake," Luke interrupted, and the pain in his voice was palpable. "See, the worst mistake of my life. I saw darkness in you and reacted with fear instead of love. I failed you, Ben. I know that. And I've spent every day since trying to figure out how to make it right." Kylo stood rigid, his fists clenched, his entire body trembling with rage and grief and something that looked dangerously like longing. Anakin moved beside him quietly. "He's trying to apologize, trying to reach you." "He's trying to manipulate me," Kylo hissed, "using sentiment as a weapon, just like you've been doing." "We're not manipulating you," Anakin said gently. "We're offering you what you've always needed, someone who sees you, really sees you, not the supreme leader, not the monster, just Ben, the boy who was hurt and never got the chance to heal." "Stop," Kylo's voice cracked. "Stop talking. Stop." The Millennium Falcon dove past the Star Destroyer's bridge, so close that Anakin could see the cockpit. And there, piloting with the same reckless skill Anakin recognized from his own flying, Luke Skywalker, older than Anakin had imagined, weathered by exile and failure, but his presence in the Force was still strong, still bright, carrying the weight of hard-won wisdom, and sitting beside him in the co-pilot seat, Kira, somehow freed from the brig, somehow connected with the Resistance, now fighting to save herself and the man who'd tried to protect her. "Open fire," Kylo ordered, his voice flat, dead. "Destroy that ship." Supreme Leader, one of the Knights of Ren, stepped forward. "Perhaps we should consider— destroy that ship." Each word was punctuated with dark side energy that made the bridge crew flinch. And turbo lasers swiveled, tracking the Falcon, targeting systems locked on. And Anakin felt the moment crystallize. This was the choice point. The instant where everything would be decided. He could let it happen. Watch Luke die along with Kira and whoever else was on that ship. Prove to Kylo that attachment led to loss. that darkness was the only protection against pain, or he could act. Anakin's presence in the Force exploded outward, not violently, but absolutely. The weapon systems on the Star Destroyer flickered and died, not from sabotage, but from the sheer overwhelming weight of Force power flowing through them, shorting out circuits that couldn't handle the energy. Every person on the bridge froze. The Knights of Ren stumbled back. Even Kylo Ren turned to stare at his grandfather with shock and something that might have been fear. "Oh, no," Anakin said simply, his voice carrying the authority of the Chosen One. "I will not let you murder your uncle. I will not let you compound your mistakes with more death." "You have no authority here." Kylo's lightsaber ignited. "This is my ship, my command. You're my prisoner." "I stayed by choice," Anakin reminded him, "to show you another way, to prove that power doesn't have to mean destruction, and I'm showing you now. Real strength is knowing when not to use it. Vader learned that lesson too late. You don't have to." The Millennium Falcon was pulling away, the Resistance fleet beginning to withdraw. They'd accomplished what they came for, rescued Kira, proven they wouldn't abandon their people, and shown Kylo Ren that not everyone had given up on reaching him. Kylo stood trembling, his lightsaber crackling with unstable energy, and torn between attacking Anakin and ordering the fleet to pursue. His mask was back on, but Anakin could feel the storm of emotions beneath it. Rage, grief, confusion, and buried deep beneath all of it, hope. Terrible, fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, redemption was possible. "Let them go," Anakin said softly. "You've proven your power 1,000 times, Ben. Now prove your wisdom. Prove that you can choose mercy when you have the power to destroy." For a long moment, nothing happened. The bridge held its breath. The Knights of Ren waited for orders. The galaxy itself seemed to pause. Then Kylo deactivated his lightsaber. "Stand down," he said quietly. "Let them go." The bridge crew hesitated, then obeyed. The turbo lasers powered down. TIE fighters broke off pursuit, and the Resistance fleet, battered but intact, jumped to hyperspace one by one. The Millennium Falcon was last to leave. Before it vanished, Anakin felt Luke reach out through the Force, felt his son's presence touch his own for the first time. There was shock, wonder, grief, and then something else. Gratitude. Luke was thanking him for being here, for trying to save Ben when he himself had failed. Then the Falcon was gone and the Star Destroyer floated alone in the Mustafar system, surrounded by the wreckage of battle and the weight of choices made. Kylo Ren stood silent before the viewport, his masked head bowed. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. "Why? Why what?" Anakin asked. "Why show me mercy? Why protect me from myself? You've seen what I've done. The world's destroyed, the lives taken. You should want me dead." "You're my grandson," Anakin said simply. "And more than that, you're someone who's been drowning in pain and darkness, thinking it's the only way to stay strong. I know that feeling, Ben. I've lived it in the visions the Force showed me, and I know that the only way out is for someone to offer their hand and refuse to let go, no matter how hard you try to push them away." Kylo turned slowly. Behind the mask, Anakin could feel tears starting to form. "I've done terrible things." So did Vader, and at the end, he chose love, chose to save his son. That didn't erase what he'd done, but it proved that redemption was possible, that even the darkest soul could still find light. Anakin stepped closer. "The question isn't whether you deserve redemption, Ben. The question is whether you want it, or whether you're willing to face your pain without using darkness to numb it." Kylo's hands trembled. The mask came off, revealing the face beneath. Young, scarred, wet with tears that he couldn't stop. "I don't know how," he whispered. "I don't know how to be anything other than this." "Then let me show you," Anakin offered, not as supreme leader, not as Vader's heir, just as Ben, my grandson, who deserves the chance to choose differently. In the silence that followed, filled only with the hum of the ship and the distant crackle of Mustafar's volcanic fury, Ben Solo took the first tentative step toward the light he'd been running from for so long. And Anakin Skywalker, the chosen one from another time, held out his hand and waited to see if his grandson would take it. The days following the battle at Mustafar were unlike anything the First Order had ever experienced. Supreme Leader Kylo Ren withdrew from active command, sequestering himself in his chambers with only his grandfather for company. The Knights of Ren stood guard, confused and uneasy, while officers whispered in corridors about leadership vacuums and concerning behaviors. But inside those chambers, something profound was happening. Ben Solo was learning to feel again. "Tell me about Padme," Ben said on the 5th day. They sat cross-legged on the floor, no furniture between them, no masks or armor, just grandfather and grandson sharing space. "The records say you loved her, that her death was what pushed you to become Vader." Anakin had been waiting for this question. "She was everything the Jedi told me I shouldn't want. Passionate, political, brilliant. She saw me not as the chosen one or a great warrior, but just as Anakin, someone who deserved to be loved for who he was, not what he could do." "And you lost her," Ben said quietly. "The vision I saw on Mortis showed me I would," Anakin admitted, "that my fear of losing her would drive me to darkness and that darkness would kill her. It's a cruel paradox, trying to prevent a future by making choices that create it." Ben's jaw tightened. "Luke saw a future where I destroyed everything, tried to prevent it by nearly killing me, and that act created the very monster he feared. Because he reacted with fear instead of trust," Anakin agreed. "The future isn't fixed, Ben. It's built from choices. Luke's choice to draw his blade created one path. But you had choices too, to talk to him, to seek help, to trust that people loved you enough to fight for you." "They didn't love me," Ben said, bitterness creeping into his voice. "They loved Ben Solo, the potential Jedi, the son of heroes. They never saw the darkness in me, never accepted that I was more than just another student." "They saw it," Anakin countered gently. "That's what terrified Luke. He saw Vader's potential in you and panicked. But seeing darkness doesn't mean you're defined by it. Every Force-sensitive person has darkness in them. It's what you do with it that matters." Ben stood abruptly, pacing to the viewport that showed the stars streaming past in hyperspace. "I've done terrible things with it. The Hosnian system alone. Billions dead because I wanted to prove the First Order's power. How do you come back from that?" "You don't erase it," Anakin said, standing as well. "The Vader never erased what he did. At the end, when he saved Luke, it didn't bring back the Jedi he'd killed or the worlds the Empire had destroyed. But it proved that choice still mattered, that even after decades of darkness, the light could still break through. It killed him. Saving Luke killed Vader. He died as Anakin Skywalker," Anakin corrected, "redeemed, free. That's not a small thing, Ben. After everything he'd done, he still found a way to die with meaning, to prove that love was stronger than hate." Ben turned, his face illuminated by starlight. "What if I can't? What if the darkness is too strong, too much a part of me? What if trying to turn back just makes everything worse?" Before Anakin could answer, the chamber doors burst open. A Knight of Ren stood there, his presence agitated. "Supreme Leader, we have a situation. General Hux is demanding to see you. The command staff is, they're questioning your leadership." Ben's expression hardened immediately, the vulnerability vanishing behind cold authority. "Tell Hux I'll address the staff when I'm ready." "Sir, he's threatening to contact the other Star Destroyers, to call for a leadership review. He's saying you've been compromised by the prisoner." Anakin felt Ben's presence in the Force spike with rage and fear. This was it, the moment where his grandson would either fall back into familiar patterns or step forward into something new. "Let me come with you," Anakin said quietly. "No, this is First Order business. I'm your grandfather, and you don't have to face this alone." For a long moment, Ben stared at him. Then, with visible effort, he nodded. "Come, but stay behind me. If this goes badly, I need you to survive." They walked through the corridors together, Anakin noting how the crew reacted to their presence, some with respect, some with fear, many with confusion. Supreme Leader Kylo Ren walking with the legendary Anakin Skywalker, like they were equals rather than captor and prisoner. The command briefing room was filled with officers. General Hux stood at the head of the table, his pale face flushed with barely controlled anger. Behind him, several captains and commanders stood in clear support of whatever challenge he was mounting. "Supreme Leader," Hux said with exaggerated formality, "how generous of you to finally join us. We've been concerned about your extended meditation sessions." "My meditation is not your concern, General," Ben said coldly. "It is when it affects your command decisions," Hux shot back. "You allowed the Resistance to escape at Mustafar. You've kept a potentially dangerous prisoner, not just alive, but free to roam the ship. You've withdrawn from command at a critical juncture in our campaign. The First Order cannot afford a Supreme Leader who's lost his focus." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the gathered officers. Anakin watched his grandson carefully, saw the tension in his shoulders, the way his hand drifted toward his lightsaber. The old Ben Kylo Ren would have responded with violence, would have made an example of Hux to reassert dominance. But this Ben hesitated, conflict clear on his face. "You think I've lost my focus," Ben said slowly. "You think my grandfather's presence has made me weak?" "I think sentiment has clouded your judgment," Hux said, "as it clouded Vader's at the end. The First Order requires strength, not..." "Vader's redemption at the end took more strength than any act of cruelty ever did." Anakin interrupted, stepping forward. He felt Ben's surprise through the Force, but continued. "It takes no courage to destroy. Any fool with a weapon can kill. But to choose mercy when you have the power to destroy, to face your own darkness and choose differently, that requires real strength." "You're a prisoner here," Hux said dismissively. "Your opinions on leadership are, he's the chosen one," Ben interrupted, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "Anakin Skywalker before his fall, before Vader, and he's right." He turned to face the assembled officers. "I've led through fear and power, through rage and dominance. I thought that was strength. But I've learned something these past days. That kind of strength is hollow. It breaks eventually, consumes itself." "Supreme Leader," one of the captains spoke up, "we've followed you because you were decisive, uncompromising. If you're suggesting we show weakness to our enemies..." "I'm not suggesting we show weakness," Ben said. "I'm suggesting we show wisdom. The Empire fell because it ruled through fear alone. The moment Vader turned, the moment the Emperor died, the entire structure collapsed. Is that what we want for the First Order? An empire of terror that falls apart the moment the terror falters?" The room fell silent. Anakin could feel the officers' confusion, their uncertainty. They'd followed Kylo Ren because he was absolute, uncompromising. This version, this Ben who questioned, who admitted doubt, was unfamiliar territory. "We built the First Order on the Empire's principles," Hux said carefully. "On order through strength. What you're suggesting..." "I'm not suggesting we abandon order," Ben interrupted. "I'm suggesting we find it through something other than fear, through purpose that people choose to follow rather than submit to." He paused, then added, "And if you disagree, General Hux, You're welcome to challenge my leadership formally, but know that if you do, I'll meet that challenge not with rage, but with clarity, and you will lose. It wasn't a threat. It was a simple statement of fact, delivered with the kind of quiet confidence that was more intimidating than any display of power. Hux's jaw worked silently. The captains exchanged glances, and slowly, one by one, they backed down. "Of course, Supreme Leader," Hux finally said, his tone resentful but accepting. "We await your orders." "Then here they are," Ben said. "Set course for the unknown regions. There are First Order facilities there that operate independently. We'll regroup, reassess our strategy, and determine what kind of order we're actually trying to build." He turned to leave, then paused. "And General, if you question my leadership again, do it to my face, not behind my back in a staged confrontation designed to force my hand." He walked out, Anakin following. Behind them, the briefing room erupted in whispered conversation, but no one followed. When they were alone in the corridor, Ben stopped and leaned against the wall, his breath coming hard. "I almost killed him. For one moment, I almost just snapped his neck with the Force and been done with it." "But you didn't," Anakin pointed out. "You chose differently. That's what matters." "Is it?" Ben looked at him, his eyes haunted. "I've killed so many, Grandfather. So many people who challenged me, disagreed with me, or just happened to be in my way. One moment of restraint doesn't balance those scales." "No," Anakin agreed. "But it's a start. Redemption isn't a destination, Ben. It's a direction. Every choice to do better, to be better, that's movement toward the light, even if you can never fully reach it." Ben was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Luke contacted me, through the Force, last night while you were sleeping." Anakin straightened. "What did he say?" "That he was sorry. That he never should have given up on me. That if I ever wanted to come home, there would be people willing to help me try." Ben's voice cracked. "See, he said my mother's last words were about believing I could still be saved. That hope was her final gift to the galaxy." Tears streaked down Ben's face, and this time he didn't try to hide them. "I miss her. Force help me. I miss her so much, and I can never apologize, can never tell her I'm sorry for becoming what I became. She died thinking I was lost." Anakin pulled his grandson into an embrace. Ben resisted for a moment, then collapsed against him, sobbing like the child he'd never been allowed to be. All the rage, all the pain, all the years of pretending darkness was strength. It poured out in great, racking sobs that shook his entire body. "She knew," Anakin said quietly. "Mothers always know. Even when their children are lost, even when they're hurting, mothers know their children are still there, still capable of coming home. If she died with hope, Ben, that means she died believing in you." They stood like that for a long time, grandfather and grandson, holding each other in the corridor of a Star Destroyer, while around them the First Order continued its operations, unaware that their supreme leader was breaking apart and being remade into something new. Eventually, Ben pulled away, wiping his eyes. "What happens now? I've committed atrocities. I can't pretend they didn't happen and expect the galaxy to forgive me." "You face them," Anakin said. "Acknowledge what you've done. Work to make amends where you can. And where you can't, you bear the weight of it and try to ensure you never make those choices again." He paused. "The First Order will fracture without clear leadership. Some will follow you on this new path. Others will reject it. I try to continue what you started." "I know," Ben said. "I've been thinking about it. The unknown regions, there are worlds there that need stability, protection. Maybe the First Order can become something else, something that provides security without tyranny." He looked at Anakin. "But I can't do it alone. I need I need help, guidance from someone who understands both the light and the dark. I'll stay as long as I can, Anakin promised. But Ben, eventually the Force may pull me back to my own time. This displacement can't be permanent. I have a destiny to fulfill in my timeline, even if I don't like what that destiny looks like. I know. Ben managed a weak smile. But for now, for however long we have, will you help me? Help me figure out how to be someone other than Kylo Ren? I'll help you become Ben Solo again, Anakin said. Not the boy you were, but the man you can choose to be. Someone who carries his scars and his regrets, but doesn't let them define him. In the days that followed, the Star Destroyer traveled to the unknown regions. Some First Order vessels followed, others didn't, splintering off under commanders who saw Ben's transformation as weakness. The galaxy would be more chaotic for it, but also more honest. No more united front of tyranny, just competing factions that could be engaged with, negotiated with, or opposed as needed. Luke reached out again through the Force, and this time Ben answered. They spoke, carefully, painfully, beginning the long process of healing wounds that had festered for over a decade. The Resistance watched from a distance, uncertain whether to trust this change or prepare for betrayal. But they didn't attack, when that restraint was its own kind of hope. And Anakin felt the Force beginning to pull at him again, felt the temporal displacement growing unstable. His time in this future was running out, and soon he would return to Mortis, to his own timeline, armed with knowledge of what he would become and desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, he could choose differently. On his final night, he and Ben stood before the viewport, watching stars blur past in hyperspace. When you go back, Ben said quietly, will you remember this? Remember me? I'll remember, Anakin promised, and I'll fight like hell to make sure I never become Vader. But if I fail, if I can't change my own destiny, at least I'll know that even Vader's legacy could be redeemed, that you found your way back to the light. Because you showed me it was possible, Ben said. No, because someone finally refused to give up on me. The Force pulled harder, and Anakin felt reality beginning to fracture around him. The same sensation he'd felt on Mortis, that sideways tearing through existence. Ben, he said urgently, whatever happens, whatever the galaxy throws at you, remember that redemption is always possible. Even when you've gone too far, even when you think it's too late, love is stronger than hate, always. I'll remember, Ben promised, tears streaming down his face. Thank you, Grandfather, for saving me when I didn't think I could be saved. The Force exploded around Anakin, pulling him back through time and space. The last thing he saw was Ben Solo, not Kylo Ren, but Ben, standing alone in the viewport's light, no longer drowning in darkness, but learning to walk in the light again. Then Anakin was falling through the temporal maelstrom, through visions of possible futures and alternate paths, until he slammed back into his body on Mortis. The son's laugh cut off abruptly. The father stared at him with ancient, knowing eyes. The Force itself intervened, showed you not just your darkness, but what comes after, what that darkness creates. Anakin looked at his hands, felt the weight of 30 years of memories that hadn't happened yet. Ben's face, Leia's recorded message, Luke's grief. The cycle of darkness passed from one generation to the next. I won't let it happen, Anakin said with quiet certainty. I won't become Vader, and if I do, if destiny is inescapable, I'll make sure that when the time comes, I choose love over power, choose redemption before it's too late. The father smiled sadly. Perhaps that is the true meaning of the prophecy, not to destroy the darkness, but to show that it can be overcome, to prove that even the darkest soul can find light again. Then I'll be that proof, Anakin said. For Padme, for my children, for Ben. He stood, his resolve crystallizing. The future isn't written in stone, and I'm going to make damn sure this prophecy means something other than inevitable tragedy. The Force hummed around him with approval or acknowledgement. He couldn't tell which. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He had seen the worst possible version of himself and witnessed his own grandson's desperate struggle for redemption, and that knowledge, that terrible gift, would guide every choice he made from this moment forward. Somewhere in a future he'd just left, Ben Solo was learning to be more than his grandfather's shadow, learning that the legacy he'd been given could be transformed into something new. And in the present, on Mortis, Anakin Skywalker was learning the same lesson. Destiny could be challenged, darkness could be faced, and love. Love was always worth fighting for, even when the entire galaxy seemed bent on proving otherwise. The Chosen One walked out of the nightmare not broken but forged, not defeated but determined. And in another timeline, another universe, a young man who'd been lost in darkness took his first tentative steps toward the light, carrying hope that his grandfather had given him. Hope that redemption was always possible, no matter how far you'd fallen. The cycle was broken, the future remained unwritten, and the Force, in its infinite wisdom, whispered that sometimes the greatest destiny was simply choosing to be better than what darkness demanded you become. May the Force be with you. More stories await.